What's going on, guys? Welcome back. MMA commentary for you. Do me a favor, like button, subscribe button, criticism in the comment section, Twitter. Shutdown Safety is my username. Generally joined by my good buddy Anthony Lionheart Smith. He is out getting some much needed rest and relaxation as he prepares for the TUF 23 finale one day prior to UFC 200. Before I get involved in the UFC breakdown of 199, though, we're going to talk about a man who changed a sport, a nation, an era, a global way of thinking, had some of the most epic matches at a time where boxing truly was king and will never ever be replicated in what he did for a society, not just as a sports figure. Sad to hear of the loss of Muhammad Ali earlier this evening. To get into the breakdown, though, we'll start with a fight between Dustin Poirier and Bobby Green. Now, ever since Dustin Poirier lost to Conor McGregor, I've kind of had a hard time taking him seriously. Since his move down to lightweight, though, he's put together a pretty solid resume, even though he had an opponent come in heavy and still took the fight. Bobby Green kind of gets this local card. He's coming off a really confusing fight against Edson Barbosa and essentially 18 months off where he's kind of cited injuries every time a fight came up. You know, it's hard to expect, I guess really it's hard to know what to expect rather from Bobby Green, but it's not from Poirier at this point. You know, Green, though, has had a history of making guys lose composure and capitalizing on that frustration. But I think if Poirier learned anything from the McGregor fight, he's kind of learned how to keep emotions in check and stick to a game plan. I think it's going to give him the edge in this fight and ultimately the win. You know, going forward, if you followed MMA even remotely close, you know the names Dan Henderson and Hector Lombard. You know, these are two guys basically riding off into the sunset here with their last grasp on a main card, essentially. Henderson obviously has some surprises left in him. I think we've seen that. Even if the power has dropped off a touch, the H-bomb, if you will, is pretty effective. Lombard is really just an unapologetic striker. He struggles with his endurance and honestly would rather throw caution into the wind than worry about a technical matchup. I think Henderson at 45 is obviously going to have an expected risk with his chin and his speed. It seems like a recipe for me for Lombard to come out on top with a knockout early. In what may be a case of kind of overmatch making, we've got Ricardo Lamas looking to halt Max Holloway's tear through the featherweight division. Both guys extremely well-rounded and most likely will see a decision. I give the edge to Lamas in wrestling, Holloway in striking, but I think Lamas will have the advantage in a close battle, thinking he can lure Holloway into a ground game and win on a ref's scorecard. That's probably the only fight I see really being boring in this whole event. The co-main and main event are highlighted by a lot of emotional fights. You've got Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz essentially both dismissing each other as fighters and exclaiming dominance over the past two fights they've had all week. In the first fight, you know, Cruz really had a varied approach to Faber before settling in with some jabs, some very well-timed uppercuts. Faber, who a lot of people, including myself, though, could rely on his wrestling, actually had that neutralized by Cruz, and I just can't imagine that Faber's wrestling has improved by then. Sure, he's fought some great opponents, and Cruz has been inactive, you know, mending, maybe even a faux pas retirement as he did some commentating. But I think Faber is going to be more polished. I think he's in a more clear mental state right now, and he knows how to get the job done. I think he's finally going to get the UFC gold that's eluded him for so long. In the main event, Michael Bisping steps up for Chris Weidman to take on Luke Rockhold, and honestly, it's going to take an absolute rare mistake from Rockhold to win and Bisping to come out with an absolute flawless performance. I think to that point, Bisping's done a very good job, a great decision by trying to get in Luke's head pre-fight all week, because honestly, he's going to need every advantage he can get. Rockhold ironically put some insurance on this fight by putting some fear into an MCL issue he talked about dealing with in camp during Friday's presser, but it's not a secret. His left kick is becoming one of the most feared threats in the game, and for that reason, I'll take Luke Rockhold all day long on this card. Love to know your guys' opinions on this. Appreciate you checking it out, and I'm hoping that Anthony will join me with a recap shortly after 199.